Hello again. Okay, this video is going to be about buying second-hand condensing boilers, and maybe you might prefer to be aware of a few things, or two or three things at least, before you go and buy yourself a nice shiny new or second-hand condensing boiler on eBay. Now, the first thing you need to remember, or first thing you need to think about, is why is someone selling a second-hand boiler? And that's because, generally speaking, people do not spend £2,000-3,000 changing a boiler for absolutely no reason at all. I wouldn't, and I'm sure you wouldn't. So the first question you've got to ask yourself is, why would someone be selling a second-hand condensing boiler? Now, that usually is because there is something wrong with it, or someone has said you need a new boiler. So then they've bitten the bullet, paid the money, and got themselves a nice new boiler. Now, that means that either the owner of the boiler will try and recoup some of the cost by selling the old one on, or the plumber who took it out, who's condemned the boiler, has put it on the back of his van and decided to put it on eBay and try and make a few quid on the side. Either way, probably that boiler is going to be faulty, or there's going to be something wrong with it. So that's the first thing you need to take into consideration. The second thing, which is probably the most common sense reason, is that you've got to remember that these boilers came out in 2005. So we had no idea what they were going to be like, or what they were going to perform like in the future. So we've had to wait over a decade to see what these boilers are going to be like. Now, again, this is just talking from my own personal experience and my colleagues that we work with. We all know that average lifespan of one of these boilers, if you're lucky, is about 12 years. If you're really, really lucky and the installation was carried out very, very well, the boiler's been very well looked after, the system's clean and it's been chemically treated, you may get 15 years, but generally they pretty much disintegrate when they get to about 12 years old. They start literally just falling off the wall in pieces. They just disintegrate. They're not very well built. So if you're going to buy a second-hand condensing boiler, you've got to think of like, well, how long is it going to last me? Now, I've looked at some of the prices. I've just bought these two boilers on eBay, bearing in mind that I know what I'm buying. I know what I'm buying. I know what I'm looking at. And I also know roughly what's wrong with them before I buy them. So I know how much they're going to cost to repair, or cost me to repair. Now, I bought these two boilers purely for making videos, because I've got a training platform now on Patreon where people can subscribe to the channel and they can learn about boilers. I'm going to actually teach people how boilers work. So that's why I need the boilers. And this one I got working today, literally within the last hour or so. I've actually managed to get this boiler up and running on a temporary rig so that I can swap the boilers over. Anyway, that's why I bought these two boilers. Now, both these boilers have got failed gas valves, F54 fault codes on them, so I knew roughly what was wrong. This one, the guy was very honest. He'd had the boiler taken out and he'd put it on eBay for spares and braking only, which is very, very honest of him. This one, however, was sold, and I knew before I went there was going to be something wrong with it, but this was being sold as like taken out, working when removed from property. But it wasn't, because it's got an F54 fault code on it. So I know, and I've gone through the service history and the fault finding history and the fault code history, sorry, and I know that's had 10 recurring fault codes all the same. So I know that boiler was faulty when it was taken out, but it was sold as working. But that makes no difference to me. But what you got to remember is if you buy a boiler, bearing in mind that these come out in 2005, this is a later model, this is 2012 models, but you've only got a 12-year lifespan roughly on that boiler. So if you buy a boiler and it's already 7 or 8 years old, realistically you're only going to get 3 or 4 years out of it. The chances are that if you do buy the boiler second hand, there's probably going to be something wrong with it, so you're going to have to pay more money to get it fixed, and then at the end of that, what are you actually getting for your money? You've still got a second hand boiler that's got 3, 4, 5 years left in it, maybe, if you're lucky, and you've just spent probably half or 3/4 of what it would have cost to buy a brand new boiler anyway. So again, is this something that you really want to get involved in? So just a couple of tips if you are really desperate and you cannot afford a new boiler, you would need to buy something secondhand. There's a few things you can do to try and protect yourself. Number one, do your research. Contact the seller. Ask the right questions. How old is the boiler? When was the boiler taken out? Was the boiler actually working when it was removed? Make sure, if you can, you get a photograph of the data badge underneath here. There's a data badge underneath the boiler, white, about the size of a fag packet, white label, and that'll have all the information about the boiler on it. So you'll have the actual model number, and you'll have a serial number which you can actually tell what year that boiler was made. And I'm going to show you on a little thing in a minute. Well, might even be on the screen now, I don't know. But anyway, we'll look at that, it gives some more information. So get as much information about that boiler as you possibly can. Once you've got those sort of details, you can make an assessment as to how much you want to pay for it. Now, me personally, I would never pay more than £200 for a second-hand condensing boiler, maybe 250, and that would be at a push. It would have to be absolutely mint condition for me to pay that sort of money for a second-hand condensing boiler. So again, you've got to weigh up what you're actually saving and what you're going to get out of it as a second-hand appliance. Personally, I don't think it's worth it, but that's my personal opinion. Oh yeah, and one other thing you've got to really watch out for, and I'm going to put this picture on the video so you can see for yourself. People who sell the boilers or are selling boilers on the second-hand market, most of them don't even know what they're selling. Now, I've seen so many descriptions of boilers, especially on eBay, where they describe the boiler as like an Ecotech 2 R1, 7 years old, 824E combi, whatever. Very, very descriptive detail on the appliance. But when they take photographs of the boiler, and the one I'm going to put on the video, the boiler is actually 1996 Turbomax VUW242E. Not even a condensing boiler. It's 30 years old. No, 24 years old. Sorry, my mistake. It's over 24 years old. So how do you know what you're buying? Because it's telling you you're buying a condensing boiler that's only 5 or 6 years old, and yet the pictures that they put up of the boiler are of a 1996 boiler. So if you are going to buy something secondhand, personally my advice would be don't. If you are going to buy a secondhand boiler, do your research, ask the right questions, and for God's sake, don't pay more than £200-300, because you're not going to get your money back in the overall lifespan of the boiler, and it's probably going to cost you more money in the long run because you're going to have to get it repaired, because there's more than likely going to be something wrong with it, unless you come across one that's maybe where a house has been refurbed, or an insurance claim, or maybe someone's having a lot of work done on the house and they're taking the old boiler out to replace it with a brand new one and a brand new heating system, in which case it would be a good buy. But there ain't many of those on the market, come on the market for sale anyway. But if you can find one like that, you've probably got half a chance. But if you're going to do it, please just be careful, because, well, I can only tell you to be careful. Do your research and hope for the best.